with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. Hey, Rich, what is happening with the mortgage rates? I got to tell you, the housing market is just like off the charts. And, we talked last week about the surge of different sorts of products because of COVID. Who would have thought? But home products, appliances, major appliances, countertop appliances, just anything that goes into your home, people just really, really invested in their homes. And now you see, and this has been going on for a while in many parts around the country, there's just no homes to buy. There's just no inventory. It's absolutely crazy.
The average length of time in Coral Gables, which granted is a very upscale neighborhood
in South Florida,
one of the most upscale in the state of Florida, 2 weeks. That's the length the house stays on the market. When it goes on the market, 2 weeks later, there's a contract on that house. That's how severe it is.
I was in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and the same thing is happening there. A good friend of mine, he's from Nashville in Tennessee. The same thing is happening there. It's just all over the country, and I just don't know what's driving it, right? Because with COVID, everybody was supposed to be like putting the wagons in a circle, and we got to save every dollar, and we got to be very conservative. We don't know what's around the corner, and but people are spending money like crazy
because they got bored. Because they sat home and they said, I don't like this sofa anymore. I don't like this TV anymore. I don't like this refrigerator.
Well, I don't like this house anymore. I'm going to go buy another one.
I'm out of here. I don't like it happened to me. My wife said, I don't want this washer and dryer anymore. It's not even that old. I don't want this washer and dryer anymore. And I couldn't even get the washer and dryer that you wanted because I couldn't get it from GE. It wasn't happening. It took about 2.5 months to get a washer and dryer after we ordered it and paid for it. It's crazy, man. But the mortgage thing is very significant, I think.
Yeah, now you're seeing at least advertised rates. It's they're probably advertising something that most people don't qualify for, but it's not that far off. 2.5% for 30-year mortgage.
I don't have a mortgage on my house. I don't. Well, no, because I sold my big house and I downsized and bought it for cash. But I got to tell you something: if the rates keep getting that low,
go get a mortgage.
I'll go get a mortgage on my house. I want to get the money out of the house. Yeah. I'll buy another washer and dryer. I heard they're in stock. I can do that again. I don't know. Yeah, it's very exciting, very interesting, and yet very scary times. I had to throw that in.
So let's, go from mortgages to labor unions. And, of course, with a Biden administration, the unions are really feeling the roads, right? They're feeling that this is their time to really go out there, use the support of the Democrat Party, this administration, in order to force unionism upon workers who really don't want it. And we've seen that with Volkswagen in Tennessee, back at the end of the Obama administration. Now you see it at Amazon in Alabama. It was amazing statistics of how many people voted.
Resounding turn down.
First of all, and they didn't vote to be unionized. They didn't vote by a big number. It was turned down, not by a little bit.
Exactly.
It wasn't a squeaker.
An amazing thing for the union to see, but they're not giving up.
They're not giving up because they got,
they got Uncle Joe.
They got their best friend in the White House.
They got Joe Biden.
And then there's interesting stuff happening in the state of Florida, too. There's just a lot of interesting stuff happening in Florida on many different levels. But also in the Florida legislature about unionism with state employees. So very, very important stuff happening with unions. We're very pleased to bring on the show someone who's an expert, Vincent Vernuccio. He's with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, does a lot of work on unions and tracking what's going on. Vincent, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, Neil. Thank you for having me on.
So let's start off with the state of Florida. A lot of things happen in the state of Florida. It's one of those states that, just a lot of crazy stuff happens. But there is a big there is a big battle brewing in the Florida legislature with unions, and some stuff running its way up through the legislature. A lot of party line stuff. Democrats voting heavy for the unions, Republicans not. Can you fill us in what's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Florida has introduced some of the best legislation to protect public employees in the country this year. They want to extend the right of public employees to get to vote on the union that represents them. It's a right that teachers have down there. But essentially it's saying that, hey, if the union isn't representing a majority of employees, let's give those public workers an election to see if they want to keep the unions. It's also saying that, and this is shocking, and it's shocking that anyone would be opposed to this. It also says that, hey, by the way, public employees have a First Amendment right to choose to join a union and to choose to pay dues or not. Let's just inform them of that right. So it does that. And it also says that public employers shouldn't be the bills collector for union dues. So public employees are entitled to their full paychecks before any money is taken out and given to unions. Essentially, just like you do with almost every other service you use, your private organization should write a check, put it on your credit card, do a direct withdrawal from your bank account. So it's a simple bill. It's there to protect public employees. It's there to protect taxpayers. But unfortunately, obviously, there is opposition, and we're seeing it be slowed down in the Senate. But from what I hear, there's still a lot of support for it.
Well, we've seen this, Neil, before in other states, and what this really does is put a damper on the guaranteed cash flow going into the coffers of the union. It's a guarantee. At the first of the month and the 15th of the month, you're going to get money into the union. Good, bad, or indifferent. Rainy days, snowy days. Of course, you wouldn't have that in Florida, but it's going to be there. And I would think any good union carrying mug would be delighted to be able to take that money. So to say that, well, I guess you're going to have to rely upon the integrity of the employee to pay their union dues, I guess that puts a little question mark out there. They don't like that.
So, Vincent, what's the difference? What's the difference of this? And I'm a little confused because the Supreme Court, made a very, very big decision about how employees are not forced, if they work for the state, they have a right not to be in the union. And in fact, they have a right not to have to pay union dues. It's not like, if you get a job, you got to pay union dues to a union that is politically very active in areas that you don't support or you don't believe in. And that's the beautiful thing about America. We can all believe in what we want to believe in. But in the state of California, in many states, it was mandated before you could have a state job, you had to join the union and you had to pay the dues. And even though that you would be very against how that money was being used for political purposes, you still had to pay it if you wanted that job. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. You can't force someone to join a union and take their money and put it into an investment, in this particular case, a union, using the money for political beliefs that they don't support. That was decided by the Supreme Court already. So what's the difference that's going on in Florida right now?
Actually, what's going on in Florida is simply making sure that public employees are aware of those rights. So you're exactly right. The Supreme Court in the Janus versus AFSCME case did two things. First, it said that everything that unions do is political, and because everything that unions do is public sector unions do is political, public employees have a First Amendment right to choose whether to pay them or not. But then it went further, and it said that in order to collect those payments, there needs to be what Justice Alito called clear and compelling evidence of affirmative consent. So essentially what the Supreme Court said is, hey, sure, you want to pay a union, that's great, just make sure there's evidence, and essentially you have to opt in, not sign something once with a massive amount of paperwork and have money immediately taken out of your paycheck and given to the union. So that really is the heart of what this Florida bill is doing. It's saying that in order to have that money go to that union, that public employees need to be informed that, hey, this is a First Amendment right. You don't have to do this. and then be given that choice and make sure there's a paper trail, there's that clear and compelling evidence that they actually choose to join and support this political organization. So, actually, Janice was one of the main reasons for this bill, because those legislators in Florida want to make sure that they are sticking to the intent of the Supreme Court in the Janice decision.
So what we're saying, you mentioned in your article, Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith from Orlando is saying, well, basically, it wants to make it hard for the unions to get funded, and it goes on to say, well, this is really a union-busting bill. I don't know if it's really a union-busting bill. It's a union challenge bill.
It's a bill that's informing public employees about their rights. It's bringing democracy to those public employees.
Well, folks, stay with us. We're with Vincent Vernuccio. He's with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, and we're going to continue our discussions about unionism. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. And we are together with Vincent Vernuccio from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. So, Vincent, talking about unions, and you talk about public unions, those are federal workers or state workers, our federal government. They have a union, and it's a very, very powerful union. And in the past, it was mandatory that you had to be part of the union if you were going to have that job. And you see that in states. You see it in states, definitely with teachers and many, many state employees. They were forced into
SEIU? Wasn't that the organization years ago that was so powerful, SEIU? And they had all the federal employees. They had an amazing number of membership.
And yeah, but think about the money that's cycled here, right? All of these dues are cycled into the unions, and then that money is recycled back to the political elite. And obviously then the favors and what happens, and you see that right now. Essentially the federal government tipping the scale, putting their finger on the scale on the side of the unions. But unionism in the United States is really down. When you talk about private industry, it's like the lowest it's been since forever, right? Since at its height back in, I believe, in the 1950s. You're less than 10%, 7-8% of the people in private industry is a member of the union. That's an historical, and it gets less and less and less. So the only way that unionism can work is that if there is some government interference, government, pushing their agenda, because they're stale, they're old, they don't have any new ideas. This is like this is like 1950s, and they haven't changed their business model. They haven't adopted to the new economy. They're just like totally irrelevant, but for their political contributions in the money in the machine that they bring to bear during elections. So, Vincent, tell us what's going on with Amazon, and what. It's amazing that so many people voted not to form a union at Amazon, and you hear how Amazon is such a tough and rough, and it's the working conditions are terrible, and people have to work 18, 19 hours a day, and they don't get breaks, and blah 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 blah. So if it's really so bad, why aren't they voting for a union?
Well, clearly it's not nearly as bad as the unions were trying to make it out to be. But yes, the union that was trying to organize Amazon took a shellacking with their latest organizing drive, losing by over a 2-1 margin, and those were just the workers that actually voted in the election. Overall, it was a small minority that said that voted yes for the union. And this is after you had all these heavyweight politicians, from Bernie Sanders to even President Biden, saying, hey, you guys should unionize. So, it really shows that what we're seeing is the politicians, they want the union. But the workers are saying, no, we're good. We don't need you. We aren't buying what you're selling, and they're saying no.
Well, that's exactly correct, and I find it amazing they keep coming back for another shellacking. I mean, it sounds like a commercial for some car or something that I had years ago. But they keep coming back, and I don't know. They're still fighting the Amazon thing, aren't they? Aren't they trying to overturn that with the NLRB or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle. Everyone was kind of predicting, well, it's going to, the union's going to probably lose, and they're going to come back, and they're going to claim all of these things from the company. But with the huge margin that the union lost by at Amazon, they're trying to claim that there's election interference, but it is going to be a very, very hard lift. Seeing that it was over a 2-to-1 margin of employees saying, no, we're better off without you.
So, instead of forcing a union, it sounds like, well, we're going to come back and do another vote. And we're going to lose, but we're going to come back and do another vote. And Neil, you just pointed out, like, are they retreads of what they were doing back in the 50s and 60s and 70s? Or are they going to come forth with something that, the 3.0, the 2022 model for the unions? What do they change? I mean, obviously, the pedestrians out there don't want it. They're not interested in it. So if in fact the union's going to survive, particularly if they're going to try and overturn right-to-work states and get the union in, what do they offer?
There's a great Michigan commentator that on an NPR station said that unions have figured out how to organize in the 1950s, and if the 1950s ever comes back, they are going to be in great shape. You know what? The 50s aren't coming back. And unions are not adapting. Yeah, they have this industrial revolution, one-size-fits-all mentality that here is your take-it-or-leave-it collective bargaining agreement. We're going to treat you workers like interchangeable cogs in a wheel. We're not going to give any individualized benefits or individualized contracts. And this is just the way we work. And, of course, they're failing because workers are saying, yeah, we don't want that model. We want merit pay. We want to be rewarded.
Vincent, hey, you've been a great guest. Vincent Vernuccio, and he's with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Great discussion about the status of unions in America. We really appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Coming up, we have Richard Shulman, who is the editor of Founders Broadsheet. And we're going to talk about the Biden tax and spending program. And is this good for the economy, or will it destroy the American economy? Stay with us. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, a very, very fascinating discussion with Vincent Vernuccio from Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He's well plugged in, well informed about the status of unions in America. Hey, no big votes are planned. But the PRO Act, getting rid of right to work. I mean, when you've got now 27 states that are part of the right to work movement, and yet in the Senate they're trying to overturn states' self-determination of what their work.
Self-destruction too.
Well,
while you're on the self.
Well, that's correct. That's what it leads to. Mm-hmm. Because these states are the ones who are generally the most prosperous in the country.
They are thriving. The right to work states are doing well.
We talked about the real estate market. People are leaving the Northeast. They're leaving in droves. They're leaving California. They're leaving in droves. The real estate market in these right-to-work states is just blowing up. I mean, prices are going through the roof. There's no inventory. People are moving into these states like at historic rates, at historic levels.
Well, right-to-work states and low-tax states, low-regulation states. free market state. So there's a clever idea.
the non-lockdown states. Whoa.
Send your kids to school.
But hey, look, there's also this the amount of money that we're spending right now. I mean, it's just like trillions is just thrown around. Like I remember when $1 billion was a big thing. I remember back when people talked of billions and it was like, holy cow, $1 billion! I can't believe that. That's like mind-boggling. Now it's like trillions, and where are we going to get this? Doesn't even matter where this money comes from anymore. I mean. It doesn't even matter. I don't know. I've been predicting. I talked about morphine economics, and like you spend all this money, and at one point it's gonna kill you because it's a drug, and this drug is very powerful, and you think you're getting better, but it's actually killing you.
Right.
And that's called morphine economics.
Exactly.
I mean, if this is not morphine economics, I don't know what is. But let's bring in our next guest. A great guy, Richard Shulman. He's the editor at Founders Broadsheet. Richard, welcome to Made in America.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
So, tell us. I mean, I got to tell you, it just scares the bejesus out of me seeing how much money we're spending, and there's just so much money awash in the American economy right now. But I mean, is that money real money? I mean, is it just fake money? Is it just money that's just keystrokes on a computer? And what is the impact of creating all this money to spend all this money that is just creating out of like air, like keystrokes on a computer? I mean, what's the risk of all this?
Well, there's a very good chance they're going to destroy the dollar as the key international currency. That will bring down the whole international trade system or create enormous disruptions. It will be to the advantage of China. They're rooting for this kind of a development. This is a case where the Biden administration is using the coronavirus pandemic as a crisis to do an imitation of the Depression, the 1930s Depression, and they want to pretend that without all this enormous spending, we can't have a recovery of the economy. Well, the economy is recovering even without all this waste of money. And this is really dangerous. When inflation is factored in, we're cutting the defense budget at a time when China is possibly preparing to invade Taiwan and certainly taking over the entire East Pacific around their own shores. And Russia is increasing its forces on the border of Ukraine. So we've got a two-front war that's potentially threatening, with the Biden administration throwing all its money at unnecessary welfare expenditures and effectively cutting defense.
Well, I think what you're saying is exactly on target. I mean, I think there are a couple of things that are playing out there, and one of them really scares me. I'm going to get to that in a second. You were talking about the 20s and the Depression, and FDR comes to mind, of course, because he, hit hard into the 30s. But Joe Biden sees himself as an FDR. I mean, he's the new Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He's got the New Deal. He's got the Green New Deal. He's going to, use the big government to save, and I think our guest is 100% correct. We've created a false sense of the late 1920, early 1930 Depression, which brought about this whole New Deal and the revival of the big government. But having said that, and here's my second point, Richard, I'm interested in your point. I'm scared that I'm looking at this, I'm saying, my God, this reminds me of the Roaring '20s. Everybody was having a great time. Everybody's making a lot of money. Everything's going along. And then all of a sudden, something very bad happened, and it got worse, and it got worse, and we went to a very dark time of American history. I see that. That's what I see. I see a Roaring '20-esque moment with an FDR-like person off on the side, and you're right. We have threats from overseas. Russia's updated the nuclear arsenals. We haven't. Russia's massing troops on the Ukrainian border. China is really pushing it hard in their area in the South China Sea, as well as Taiwan. North Korea is about to do something where it looks like we're kissing up to Iran again. Go figure that one out. And that's not a good thing. So someone's going to fill that vacuum. And I think Richard, I think you're 100% correct.
one comment as a transition from your previous speaker. There are several aspects in these new plans by the administration to restrict any kind of competition, whether it's between states and countries. Your previous speaker mentioned the right-to-work laws and how the administration's trying to prevent competition between states on that. They're also in the American Rescue Plan, they're trying to prevent states from cutting taxes. Anyone who takes any money from the American Rescue Plan, any state that takes money, is, unless the law is challenged on this point, is going to be denied the ability to cut taxes. And the same thing the administration is doing with the American Jobs Act and the tax provisions of it. There's two anti-competitive provisions in it. One, Janet Yellen is working with the OECD to set a corporate global minimum tax at anywhere from 19 to 21%. This will prevent competition between countries in lowering their corporate tax rates at a time when the administration is about to raise the American corporate tax rate to an effective rate of 33%.
Richard, we got to take a quick break. Just hold that thought, because this is a very important topic, very important subject that we're talking about. Richard Shulman, editor of Founders Broadsheet. He's going to be with us just in a moment. Stay with us. Still a lot more to talk about.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we are together with Richard Shulman, who's the editor of Founders Broadsheet. Richard, I do want to ask you this question. I think it's a very important question, something that we were talking about. We're creating all this currency, and we're awash in all this currency, and all this currency is being accumulated, and it's just out there. And these crazy multiples that's being spent for companies and for assets. I mean, especially since there's been COVID, and COVID. A lot of companies, a lot of industries were wiped out, and those industries are not good industries, and people don't want to invest in those industries. But the industries that thrived, I mean, they're getting crazy valuations, and there's just so much money out there chasing these assets. It'll make your head spin. So then you say, well, this is going to come back to bite us, and we're creating all this money, and it's just insane, and we're spending all this money, and it's just insane. But then some people will say, yeah, that's true. But when you talk about China, you talk about Europe, you talk about Japan and other countries, wealthy countries, economic superpowers in their own rights, that they're even more screwed up than we are. So even though we're doing this, if you look at their economies, that they're so much worse off, and that America will still be the one that comes out of this better than the others. And if you take a look at what's going on with vaccines around the world right now, America's doing a great job. I mean, more people are getting vaccinated here. You talk and look at the rollout of the vaccines in Europe. It's been a complete disaster.
Well, look at the disaster in Latin America. Brazil is a death march.
Don't forget about that. And then you talk about China, and they have a vaccine that doesn't work. And so people still look at America.
Iran has a vaccine. I'm sure that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to work well.
So you take a look at this and you say, yeah, it's crazy stuff in America, but look what's going on around the world, and we're still performing so much better than everybody else. What would you say to that?
Well, I think you're right about all this waste spending potentially leading to a bubble or crash. It's almost a sure thing. The reason we've done so well on the COVID vaccinations is because our pharmaceutical industry managed to stave off until the Democrats, until Obamacare, strict government regulation of the pharmaceutical companies. Look what happened with welfare state policies in Europe. Their pharmaceutical companies didn't keep up. And that's another one of those things which all the administration interventions into healthcare are going to threaten the future of the independence of the pharmaceutical industry, their ability to make profits and use those profits to invest in new technologies. We got going so fast with this new technology that's behind the Pfizer vaccine that wouldn't have been possible in an unfree environment.
Well, you know what's interesting? This is a good thing that I just noticed that came across. This week, Biden's White House announced that they were considering raising, listen to this one, Richard, capital gains tax to nearly 44%. That's what they want to do. That's what they're thinking of doing. That's what they're throwing out there right now. Now, you couple that with a doubled capital gains tax. You add that to the taxes that we're talking about against rich people anyway, with a certain level. You know, then you talk about the regulations that are coming in. Then you talk about the minimum wage that the Democrats are dying to inflict on everybody, whether you're a small town or a major urban center. Then you add all that together, and people like Stephen Moore saying, I'm getting worried about inflation. I'm getting worried about where this economy is.
Inflation's already here, man.
Well, yeah, I know that. You can see that. And energy's going up. I mean, everything seems to be going in a very perverse manner right now. And particularly, you start seeing a capital gains tax at 44%. That is outrageous. Yeah. What happens to investment dollars that want to go back into R&D?
30 seconds, Richard. We got 30 seconds.
Okay. Yes, it's crazy. It's taking away money for investments, ironically, in infrastructure, which is 60% done by the private sector. It hurts labor, it hurts investment, and it hurts productivity, which is the only way the standard of living of the American people are going to increase, is by those private sector investments.
Richard, that's very good. Private sector investments. Remember that. Freedom, economic freedom. Richard, thanks for being on the show. Richard Shulman, editor of Founders Broadsheet. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, the headline, at least here at Made in America, is economic freedom. It's economic freedom. We got to be free to invest. And we have to have the resources to invest that we work so hard to create. So America continue to be prosperous. But it's, like you said, Joe Biden, FDR, big government, taking money from the most productive part of society, the free economy, our entrepreneurs, our small businesses, our risk takers, our inventors, taking the money from them and giving it to a government bureaucrat, whether they be in Washington or some state capital or in some local town. It's just not the way that you create jobs and you create prosperity. And capital gains at 44%. Are you kidding me?
Well, think about that.
You got China. You got communist China right now with a tax rate effectively of 15%. 15%.
We would be
So we think that at 21%, we got it to 21%, and we said, "Wow, this is so great. We're like the lowest tax country in the world." No, we're not. if you take a look at,
but we're a
lot of our
safer
competitors-
country. We would be a safer country. So let's say they were at 15, we were at 21.
That's fine.
You want to
could
put
work
it
with
21 and know you're not going to get arrested?
You could work with that. That's great.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about what the proposals are.
Horrible.
In order to fund this.
This is horrible.
And by the way, when they do all of this tax policy, what's going to happen? Because when they went to 21, when Trump went to 21, he got rid of all the loopholes, right? So all the special interests and all of that, it didn't matter. Okay, this is what it is. There's no way to game the system. This is what the tax rate is. You're going to pay it, and there's no deductions and so on. So they took away all of that. So now Biden, what he's going to do, he's going to raise the taxes, but what he'll do, he'll create the loopholes in there that will reward, the people who are good and true and loyal to the Democrat Party. I mean, I got to tell you, that's what's going to go on. It's going to be the bait and switch. It's going to be, yeah. They got to pay their fair share. But wink, wink, here's all these loopholes that we're going to reward those folks that are closest to us in the economy. And, of course, that money then is recycled back into the political party.
Well, that's exactly correct. But I'm thinking about all the stuff. We're talking about these taxes. Can you imagine having a corporate tax globally at 21, and I heard as high as 28? So that's not a good idea. Then you have,
how does that work? I don't know what does that mean? How does that work? Does it mean that there's a minimum global tax? Does that mean a minimum global tax on American companies?
Yeah, that are overseas, that are making and producing products overseas,
or just located and doing business overseas.
Well, if you have a company based here, but they also have plants someplace else, and they're selling and working and creating products overseas, that would fall onto this corporate tax.
Yeah, but then those products are being, many American companies are located overseas with facilities. Not that they're over there to sell back to the United States, but they're in those markets to sell to those local economies. I mean, that's great. I mean, Americans should be out in the world, showing the world what we can do. And let me tell you, that's it. Politically, no. It is American culture. It's American business. It's American entrepreneurialism. It's American. The thoughts are freedom, and it's contagious. You want Americans to be overseas promoting who we are as a people, because that's our best form of promotion for our country, right? So what are you going to do now? You're going to penalize these people because they want to bring our products to the world market and do good things, increase people's lives, improve people's lives. That's what American companies do when they're overseas.
Well, think about this. Why would we have this corporate tax on a global basis going around the world? Why would you think beyond the obvious? Well, to me, it's the homogenization of corporate. So you have this all these globalists, Neil, they unify this global concept, and everyone's on an even playing field in terms of paying a corporate tax. It moves the discussion from individual countries with borders to what the progressives want, or a borderless society. George Soros has been pushing for that. You know George Soros. When you think of bad dogs, you think of George Soros. But think about that's where I think all that's going.
Well, Rich, you got the last word today. Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. We're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.